All right, folks, we're going to call the meeting to order, and members of the public, you're advised that our meetings are webcast live by the City of Hamilton, temporarily archived on our website. Other individuals and media may also be audibly or visually recording the meeting. Madam Clerk, any changes to the agenda?
We have two delegation requests for today's meeting from Mr. Robert Iskula of the Truck Route Reboot, respecting concerns regarding the truck route review process, and from Heather Ort, respecting changes to the truck route that will increase safety for all.
Who would like to move Robert and Heather as an amendment to the agenda? It's moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? Electronically, please. Ward 10, Councillor Pearson, you're there. Sure. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Johnson on the two requests for delegations. You catching that? Okay, we got a minute, no problem. We're going to try a third time's a charm. All in favor? Oh, I did. I thought I did. Okay. And that carries. And now, any declarations of interest? Seeing none, we now require an electronic vote to approve the minutes of the March 26th, 2019 meeting, if you were here. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? And that carries. On to delegation requests. A motion to approve delegation request 6162 for today's meeting, which I think we already did, but let's do it again. Moved by Councillor Johnson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? Okay. So, we're going to look at, do we want to do the delegations now or the presentation first? All right, so we'll call our first delegate, which is you, Robert. Robert's from Truck Route Reboot, respecting his concerns regarding this citywide truck route review process. Thank you for coming, Robert.
Hi, everybody. My name's Robert Iskula. I'm here today speaking on behalf of the Truck Route Reboot Group, a growing number of concerned community members and stakeholders. Our goal is that the City of Hamilton end the practice of allowing heavy industrial transport trucks to shortcut through the urban core and residential neighborhoods of the city. As stated in past delegations, and in alignment with the City of Hamilton's strategic plan 2016 to 2025, our priority concerns remain the well-being and quality of life of our community. This includes air quality, physical and mental health, street safety, noise, vibrations, road wear and tear, etc. Our group has reviewed the consultation engagement strategy for the truck route study, and we find it to be seriously inadequate for the following reasons. First, the plan fails to truly recognize formal and informal community organizations as legitimate stakeholders in the truck route review process. Two, the plan fails to effectively and fully integrate the fundamental priority concerns we've been raising about the negative impacts that shortcutting industrial trucks are having on the livability of our city. Third, instead, the engagement strategy separates our concerns and positions them against a long list of perceived economic benefits of the current routing system. As such, we request that a stakeholder working group be immediately formed that gives all parties a seat at the table. This would provide an opportunity to hear firsthand the concerns of other stakeholders and an opportunity to contribute to the process in a way that is equitable and fair. We want to see the additional public consultation funding directed to facilitate this stakeholder working group. As well, after reading the consultant's proposed study update plan, we have the following questions. First question, how will the local impacts listed in the report be quantified? Objective decisions cannot be made if the impacts are not being measured, studied, and compared quantitatively. Two, who is making the value decisions with respect to impacts and the evaluation of impacts of existing truck routes? These specifics need to be shared and agreed upon by all stakeholders before any data collection and analysis is started. Full openness and transparency is critical to ensure that this is a legitimate consultation process. Three, how can the previous and ongoing collection of empirical evidence by Environment Hamilton staff and dedicated volunteers be officially incorporated into the study? This includes truck counts, air particulate data, and vibration monitoring data. Finally, we are aware that staff from Public Health are working with Steve Malloy and others to evaluate the impact of truck routes along streets that include sensitive land uses like schools and retirement homes. We need to know the status of this work and how it will be integrated into the truck route study review. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a number of questions to staff with respect to our consultation, and I will ask those at the appropriate time. But I am just curious, you used the word informal and formal within the context of trying to define participation in, and I imagine legitimacy of comments with respect to consultation. And I was wondering if you would like to give me your insight into what that might mean, informal and formal groups.
So basically what we're talking about, I believe, is that there's formal groups that are named, and they're also just residents that talk amongst themselves, and these groups, these people, don't have any actual real say into the process and how it's conducted. That's kind of what we're talking about. Whereas the economic trucking route and trucking people have the weight of the bargaining in this process. We want it to be equitable so that both parties are all at the same table, talking about the same thing and working out solutions.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So are you suggesting then that formal means paid staff, a professional association that has whose purpose is directly linked to trucking? Just
formal, I would say, is like a BIA, like Environment Health and stuff like that. Informal is just, groups of people that are unnamed.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So just so I understand, in the first sentence of your presentation, you could just help me understand the truck route Reboot Group is defined as a number of concerned community members and stakeholders. In that case, would the stakeholders are those stakeholders formal or informal? I'm just trying to understand.
Basically, the intent is to describe all the people that are directly affected by trucks overrunning their neighborhoods and the city they live in.
Thank you. Would you be able to identify the membership of the Reboot Group?
I don't have on hand me a list of the people, but I could probably get you something, or Linda or my colleague Beatrice there could help you out with that.
Thank you. So your second question, through you, Mr. Chairman, who is making the value decisions with respect to impacts and the evaluation of impacts? Could you unpack that a little bit for me?
So basically, like, we're talking about the value of having trucks cut through our city as opposed to not. So we want to know who is ultimately making that decision. Is it going to be based on, facts collected, data collected? Is that just going to be a decision made of, perceived notions?
Thank you. Those are my questions for now. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yep, thank you. And similar to the previous questioner, through you, Chair, thank you very much for coming down. It's awesome. So again, the truck route reboot, I heard concerned citizens, and I'm hearing you speak a lot about Environment Hamilton. So I'm assuming they're also part of the stakeholders. Who else are part of the stakeholders? Are there companies involved? Is it?
So this is local businesses that operate in our city. This is BIAs that have formally submitted letters supporting us. This is just citizens that, have reached out to us saying, what's being done, and, we're speaking on their behalf as well.
So you have local businesses and BIA as well. We already mentioned the concerned citizens and Environment Hamilton.
Cycle Hamilton is another one.
Cycle Hamilton, okay. This is really helpful, thank you. Hamilton. Okay, and again, on the second question, same as Councillor Wilson's, so are you asking for like a term of reference to get a committee together, a working group together to work with the stakeholders that you have, but also the other stakeholders that you feel you don't have any connection with?
Yeah, like it's all like hearsay and fear mongering, and yeah, we'd like to be at the same table with every party that's involved, the trucking industry, economic development, and we want to have discussions about what makes the most sense of the city, so that we don't have to like come here and fight about it.
Perhaps that takes all the fun out, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So one last question then. So a working group to work with the staff, to work with other stakeholders, to come together for a truck route that would be beneficial to everyone. Because we all know that if we take something away, then it impacts other routes, right? So we know that happens. I do anyways in my ward. Okay, so thanks again for coming out. Those are my questions.
Just before we get to Ward 3, can you just give me, you had your 4 questions at the end, and I missed the 4th, Robert. What was the last point you made, the last question?
The last question was regarding
Status of...
Public Health is working with Steve Malloy and others to evaluate the impact of the truck routes along sensitive land uses, streets that include sensitive land uses like schools and retirement homes. So we were wanting to know the status of that work and how that will be used in this truck route review process.
Thank you. Councillor Nan?
Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. I was also looking for clarity on question 4 because I missed it. Thank you, Robert, for coming in to delegate. I had a quick question. So in the truck route reboots review of the document, the report that we're looking at today as a committee, and the appendix that outlines the engagement strategy. So I just want to be very clear. In the consultation plan on page 7, truck route reboot is identified along with Environment Hamilton and Cycle Hamilton
Yes.
in the component that is a focus group, so part of the focus group consultations. And what you're proposing is integrating defining the stakeholder group to be a wider stakeholder group?
I guess that is seen more of like we are a group amongst others that will be consulted with, but seems like a very hands-off consultation. Like we want to actually having discussions, not just like being presented stuff and then saying our comments on it. So I think that's the idea there.
So not being consulted for input on data that is presented to you, but instead.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. I just wanted to be very clear because it was named there.
Yep. Sorry.
And there is a definition. I have some questions when we get to the report of staff, but defining of the stakeholders, defining of the truck network, for example, those kinds of spaces to define very clearly who is part of those networks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Move to receive. Moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Pearson. All in favor? Thank you, Robert. Much appreciated. Our next delegate is Heather Ort. Respecting changes to the truck route that will increase the safety for all. And as Heather makes her way down, Brian, you heard the previous delegate with the 4 questions. I'm going to assume all of them will be answered in the presentation that's forthcoming?
Correct, through you, Chair. If they're not answered in the presentation, we'll follow up afterwards.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. You, Mark,
Afterwards in this meeting with Steve.
you've recorded those questions. Thank you. Heather, thank you very much for coming. Go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. Good afternoon, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you for your involvement in making changes to the truck route in Hamilton. I think everybody in this room has an interest in that, so thank you. It's an issue very close to my heart. My name is Heather Ort. Herman Ort is the name of my dad. You see him on the screen here in his element, hiking, probably on the Bruce Trail, wearing his red fleece, as he loved to do. You may have heard his name because his life was taken by a heavy truck on a street in Hamilton last year, just minutes away from here. Sorry, I'm a little bit shaky. He was riding his bike and was run over by a cement mixing truck at the corner of Queen and King Streets. I'm not sure if that truck had to be in that spot because of a delivery or if it was cutting through the city to save time and gas and make more money for its company. I'm not sure. But I do feel sure that there are many, many heavy trucks, loud trucks with poor visibility, trucks with 1 or 2 trailers, which are shortcutting through the city daily. It is incredible to me how many trucks are on our city streets. My dad was 77 years old when he died, but he didn't seem his age. He was the healthiest and most fit person in our family. The coroner said that he had the body of someone in their 50s. My dad is dearly loved and missed by our family and friends. He was truly a wonderful, kind, caring, intelligent, wise, and loving man. My goal here today is mostly to speak to those of you who will have influence on the truck route through Hamilton, our city. When you have retired, will you look back and think about lives you have improved and even possibly saved by limiting trucks on our streets or otherwise? These decisions are possibly a matter of life or death. At another meeting which I attended here, I heard a city councillor talk about Hamilton being open for business. Hamilton's stated vision is to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully. Are these pretty words that have been thrown onto the city's website? Or are they actually a guiding force for the decisions that are made by our city's leaders? As was shown at the last truck route subcommittee meeting, the truck route in Hamilton looks like a spider web densely woven through the city. Does allowing heavy, long, loud, huge trucks through the city through residential streets to cut through as a favor, if they don't need to be going through the city, actually translate into the best place to raise a child and age successfully? Not at all. I don't want anyone else to get hurt or worse. I pray for the safety of the people in this city, for all of us. A friend of mine made a good point, that it is also not fair to the drivers of these huge, heavy trucks to put them in the position where they are putting people at risk. Please prioritize safety for people, starting with the most vulnerable. It is your responsibility and duty to protect people. That is more important than being open for business. Please create a system that forces trucks that are not needing to be in the city to go around it rather than through it. Please listen to people at the meetings that will be held for this truck route instead of just pretending to listen to them. Please make the changes necessary for a transformed truck route that makes Hamilton a much safer, much more pleasant place to live. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Move to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favor? Carried. Very much appreciate you coming. Steve Malloy was going to introduce the truck route master plan review. I think you're coming down to the podium, or you want to do it there?
If it's okay, I'll do it through here,
Please.
through the chair. So before I introduce the consultant that is on board, I just wanted to do a little preamble to the committee that we have listened to the last feedback provided by the subcommittee, and that's really the point of the subcommittee, is to provide us that feedback and direction, and we appreciate that, and we expect that throughout this process. Since our time of the terms of reference, we have amended our terms of reference that went out to seek a consultant, and we have used the strategic plan vision to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully to heart, and was the overarching vision of the study. We have met subsequently with Environment Hamilton and some councillors, and I attended a community meeting with Councillor Nan as well. So we have been and will continue to be part of this process of engagement. And we have collected data in consultation with our public health partners, who are a very important stakeholder as part of this process. The two things I want to kind of identify as the presentation goes on is, in the report we've identified some public consultation activities. That is really the consultant's responsibility. There is a staff responsibility, and there's a staff commitment to doing engagement as well, not just a consultant. So there are going to be activities that are going to be led through staff. So I just want to also identify that. Also, I think the important thing to note is the number of meetings identified in the public consultation plans are, I'll say, more or less fixed, but how we distribute those meetings with whom, that is certainly part of the conversation, and why we're here today is to confirm whether we're on the right path in terms of public consultation, and there is flexibility with that. And I think in terms of one-on-one engagement with individuals and stakeholders throughout the city, there is staff ownership of that, and there's responsibility to do that engagement with those stakeholders, as well as that's why we have our public open houses and forums to provide the individuals that opportunity for feedback. And one other thing I just want to identify is we have identified fall PICs in the consultation plan, but obviously now we're in the beginning of November, and those consultations will most likely be pushed out a little bit later, just because we know with darker times and when winter starts to hit, we want to make sure that we get the most out of these public engagement opportunities to maximize participation, and that's where we want to go. So I will be obviously available for other questions and answers at the end of the presentation. But at this point, this is where I would like to introduce IBI Group, who have been retained to undertake this study, and Ron Stewart, who will be the project director for the presentation. And they have undertaken a number of truck route master plans, transportation master plans, active transportation master plans throughout Canada. They are familiar with Hamilton and have done a lot of work in Hamilton, so they are aware of our issues, and I think that there is value added with their experience to bring to this process, and I think they're very coming into this with a very open mind and making sure that we get the best product that meets our overall objectives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve, as they're coming up, I've never heard this before. Engagement pushed out because of winter, it sounded like you said. So you didn't give an idea of when it might begin, and when have we had the season as a deterrent to get going on it? Can you explain that a little more?
Through this year, absolutely. I guess part A is our preparedness, because part of making sure that we have enough time to do notices and bookings of events. And sometimes when you have things in past the first week of December, there's always the holiday season, and people are busy with things, and they may not want to do that. I know last year we had an incident in the Waterdown Transportation Master Plan and in previous plans that we had to cancel PICs because of inclement weather. I have heard feedback that sometimes some segments of the population with concerns about going out at night when it's it's dark at 5 o'clock, and people may not have visual concerns and going out, and concerns for slip and fall. So we haven't set a time and when in early 2020 that would be, but I think that's part of this conversation of what's realistic. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. Hi, what's your name?
Yes, my name's Ron Stewart. I'm the project manager from IBI Group for this project.
What'd you bring with you, Ron?
I brought with me Trevor Jenkins, who's a transportation planner, and Anna Mori, who's also a transportation planner. Thank you. So again, it's been covered in a bit of the preliminary discussion, but the study objectives are to review the existing truck route network, identify the current and projected truck route related problems, develop, evaluate, and recommend solutions, and recommend the supporting policies and tools that the city can consider to mitigate the current problems and manage the potential future challenges. So to provide some context, the previous truck route master plan was done in 2010, and I was actually the project manager for that project back in 2010. Very challenging project, and anything to do with truck movements in a city is challenging. To provide some context, at that time it was shortly after amalgamation, and
Time out, sorry.
Sorry.
Some of us don't have the handout for the slideshow to follow along. I have it on the... To interrupt, Ron, we just want
Okay,
to
no, that's
follow
fine.
along.
That's fine.
I have it online. Can we get going? We'll keep going, and are we okay to keep going, though? Do you want to? Okay. Ron, carry on.
Oh.
You were saying you were involved in 2010?
Yes, so I was project manager back in 2010. And to provide context at that time, that was shortly after amalgamation. And so the background was that you had a number of amalgamated municipalities with different philosophies and approaches to truck routes. And there were also like a list of hotspot issues that had accumulated. And so the first effort was to try and develop a single cohesive truck network across this amalgamated city and prepare supporting policies. All right, so that was the context for that one 10 years ago. When we moved to, and as part of that, there was a framework, there were criteria for choosing truck routes, et cetera, but but city planning and philosophies in that evolve over the years, and we've been a part of that in a number of jurisdictions. So if we go to 2020, the direction is to review and refine the truck network and policies based on alignment with the city's vision, objectives, and desired outcomes, health and well-being of the community, feedback, needs, and lived experience of the stakeholders, and emerging technologies and goods movement policies that have evolved over the years. This is the current truck route network as of April 2017, and most of them are full-time, some of them are part-time, et cetera, just to provide some context. It's been identified to us, it's been direction from this committee, from staff, et cetera, that the influences and issues and influences we should consider, and this is at a high level: environment and the climate emergency, public health and safety, network connectivity, there's rural issues, social equity, emerging technologies and policies, the development and employment areas, and there are a number of specific hotspots, and some of them are long-standing hotspots, and some of them are affected by decades of planning, some of them are physical constraints and road networks designed for a different time, et cetera, that are all can become challenging. So for this, we put together quite a comprehensive project team. We have expertise in planning, goods movement, EAs, traffic safety, public engagement, design, GIS, complete streets design, et cetera, et cetera. And we have truck route network and goods movement experience from across Canada. We have a locally based team. The RIBI office is in Luna Station, just down the street, okay? Very familiar with Hamilton, have done a lot of work with Hamilton. Specific sub-consultants, GLP is actually Glenn Pothier, who is a renowned facilitator to help with our community consultation. We have Dave Krieger, who's known across North America for his expertise in freight movement, so we have him added to the team. Anna is leading a huge commercial vehicle study for the Ministry of Transportation, multi-year, to track the goods movement across Ontario. So she brings that experience. Trevor has a variety of transportation planning experience, has done a lot of work in the Hamilton area, and so he's also an asset. We brought 2 members of our team, but we have quite a number of members of our team. I'm actually going to let them sit down so they have to stand here for the rest of the presentation, if that's okay, but just we wanted to show you who was here from our project team and provide some context for the composition of our project team, and they're available along with me to answer questions as we at the end of the presentation. So our work plan consists of 3 stages: background review and problem identification, policy review and development of alternative solutions and evaluation, and throughout there'll be ongoing stakeholder and public consultation. So if we look at Stage 1, the background review and problem identification, we've been working with Hamilton staff to compile the relevant planning and goods movement documents and start to review them, to identify some problems and opportunities. Again, we have to determine vision, goals, objectives, and principles that align with the vision for the city, define truck route attributes and evaluation criteria, and do an inventory of health, technical, social, and natural environment. So we've commenced that, but we aren't anywhere near finished that for the first stage. People ask us when you talk about what the different criteria are, and so I defined the truck route attributes and evaluation criteria. So we thought we'd focus a bit and highlight what the preliminary evaluation criteria categories are. Well, they are environment and public health, social equity, there's land use and community designations, designations and destinations, multimodal network integration, roadway safety and attributes, and economic influences. So those are the preliminary criteria for evaluation. We talk about environment and public health influences. Well, what do we mean? Well, we mean injury prevention, chronic disease prevention, serious injury and fatality prevention. There's comments about the environment, dust pollution, mental health, well-being, climate change resiliency, noise impacts, and health equities. We turn to economic influences. Well, there's transportation system access, route quality, reliability, safety, and one of the comments is that if you give people choices and you provide positive reinforcement of certain routes, you can make them more desirable and perhaps have a more positive outcome. The route marketability, operability, providing some system consistency, route design elements, driver guidance, and economic prosperity. Okay, so taking a look at it through that lens. So where are we getting our data from? We're collecting from a variety of sources. So City of Hamilton is providing us with information on collisions, destinations, air quality, roadway attributes, etc. We've been compiling that information. From the province of Ontario, and we're directly involved in that, the commercial vehicle surveys, regional transportation plans and that. There can be census data from the Government of Canada. The industry can provide us with truck telemetrics, and there's community and stakeholder consultation. So when you say to me, well, what do you mean by truck telemetrics? Well, that's where you have actual data of truck movement, origin and destination, and paths and that type of thing to see what routes they're taking and how frequently they're taking them, which gives you an idea of what the typical routes are these days, as opposed to it being anecdotal. There are times when you want to hear from people about what have they seen out there in the street, but it helps to have data backing the actual truck movements. As part of the second stage, where we get into policy review and development, we'll conduct a goods movement best practices and policy review, drawing on lessons learned from other cities, and determine whether or not the policy practice applicability is in place for different geographies, corridors, and environments within Hamilton, and then recommend a draft policy. You have Hamilton's a large municipality, you have urban and rural, you have down by the lake, you have the escarpment, and it doesn't necessarily mean that one city and the way they handle things is directly applicable to another city, given the different types of factors that make up a city. When we look at the special policy documents, they'll deal with public health, climate change, vulnerable road users, integration with complete livable better streets, emerging technologies and disruptors, urban consolidation centers, integration of varying truck sizes and types, integration of trucks in roundabout design. And so when I think of the challenges you have in Hamilton, last month I was at the Transportation Association of Canada meetings that are in Halifax, and I was in a taxi, and the taxi was grumbling about trucks running down Barrington, right down the heart of Halifax. You have some similarities in that you have a port, you have business, and you have a downtown that is trying to make the area more livable. And so similar types of frustrations about where trucks are, where they should be, et cetera, et cetera. So it really struck me when I went at that meeting. We'll then move on to, as part of the third stage, develop alternative solutions and evaluation. We plan to use a geographic information system, and we'll use that to evaluate network alternatives. So a question was asked, who will decide and how do you decide on what's more important, less important, that type of thing? One benefit of technology since 2010 is now geographic information systems and the ability to put layers of attributes on each other. And then you can actually do what they call parametric design. I don't want to get too technical, but you know how you put weighting on certain things. Well, we'll say near schools has a weighting of 10 versus 1, and close to industrial has a different weighting, and you put weighting on different layers of attributes along networks. Well, with these type of GIS systems, et cetera, you can put in those weightings and you can say, okay, what does the network look like if we put this combination of weightings? And then you can visually display it. And then you can say, well, what if we say, they can't be on this type of streets. And so we turn that whole thing off, that layer off. And then you show it again and say, this is what the network looks like now. And so you didn't have that computing power and that ability to demonstrate what the impact of certain weightings are on the proposed network. So I think we believe that this is going to be a very powerful tool this time around as we look through as we develop and evaluate network alternatives. Public and stakeholder consultation. We have 2 phases, and we met with city staff. We put together our proposal. They liked a lot of what we had to say, but we had a good meeting with city staff, and we said phase 1 needs to be let's talk trucks, right? And to demonstrate, trying to be very open-minded, as opposed to going out, let's tell you about trucks. It's let's talk about trucks, with opportunities for participatory involvement for individuals from the grassroots to industry, including all of the groups that we've described there. And as was pointed out, you have our more detailed consultation plan that was an appendix to the agenda on the report, where we specifically talk about the different meetings and the purposes of the meetings and who would be invited to the meetings, and talked about how in some areas we want to deal with some specific groups, and in some cases then we would like to move on to where there can be some discussion in the same room where people provide different viewpoints. So Let's Talk Trucks is about educating people about, why would you need a truck route network? Why would you even have it? What type of trucks are there out there, et cetera? And then listening about the stakeholders and residents' needs, issues, concerns, and other feedback related to the network and policies, okay? And so there's the list on the right-hand side. It is a bit more detailed in the appendix of who we propose to meet with. So then in part 2, we would deal with the preliminary findings, present the preliminary findings and recommendations, collect and listen to feedback, and incorporate into the plan as appropriate. So that's a whole another round of consultation and discussion. We were asked to describe, because as we know, council, the committee and council had expressed a real need, and they've heard it from the public and stakeholders, for a comprehensive public and stakeholder consultation. And so one way of demonstrating the difference was we were asked to provide, and that's shown on the right-hand side, according to the Environmental Assessment Act general requirements, what are the basic requirements of consultation for a study of this type? And that's shown on the right-hand side, that there'd be one public information center, and so there would first actually be a notification to the stakeholders of the study, and they would be told about the one PIC event, and then you would have the one PIC event, and you would summarize the results from it and feedback, and it would all be documented. And that's the basic level, okay? The left-hand side shows the proposed consultation program. 2 rounds of 4 PICs for 8 events. Yes, the notification to stakeholders, so that's consistent with the right-hand side. An online map-based survey and questionnaire that's been quite effective in other studies where stakeholders, people can actually just go to the City of Hamilton website, be pointed to a particular location, and literally like put a pin on a map saying, this location here, put a pin on the map, and then write in the comments what the specific issues are, and that can be developed. So you don't have to necessarily show up at a PIC or some event in order to provide that type of input. Things as basic as a Let's Talk Trucks conversation kit. So again, if people can't make it, there's a bit of a package where somebody can write up their comments, it can be submitted, and it can be included. We have the meeting with the adjacent municipalities because decisions that they make impact the City of Hamilton and vice versa, because many trips are made through more than one municipality. We have the 2 community group panel discussions, focus group that was talked a bit about on page 7 of the appendix, and we can talk a bit more about that. Meetings with the Good Movement community, business improvement, chambers of commerce. And then we talked about some other pop-up events with places and times to be selected. We have the 3 truck route subcommittee and 1 council meeting, and then study fact sheets, the project webpage, and the social media content. And so this is a ballpark of the level of effort from a budget perspective in order to complete this comprehensive proposed consultation program. Proposed schedule. The project schedule, we started in October in earnest. We've been doing a lot of work on the background review and policy and problem identification. We have been waiting for, on the consultation plan, we've been waiting to have this meeting, do this presentation, get the first feedback so we didn't get too far ahead of ourselves and you say, wait a second, you're out there talking to people, you haven't talked to us about what our expectations are. So that's why it's important to have this step today, take the feedback, and then start to move forward with the rest of the plan and start to set up with staff some of the specific stakeholder consultation sessions. And that's our lovely office. We don't have all of it, we just have a major tenant in it.
Top floor, right?
Yes.
Councillor Wilson has some questions for you. Ron?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Stewart. I do have a series of questions, and they're unfortunately not in any particular order. I would like you, given your, sounds like you've been in the business of transportation planning for some time, what does social equity mean within the realm of transportation planning?
Well, I've been in many public meetings, some heated over many years. And so some of the types of things in social equity the comment can be that decisions favor people that are more well-to-do, for example, versus others in terms of the selection of routes for things, et cetera. Or that transit is not given as much priority because of the cross-section of the people that are on the routes, or that people in certain neighborhoods don't have the same representation as others. So that's what we're talking about here, to take that out of the whole equation and it be about what's the right thing to do in different parts of a city. I'll give you an example.
No, it's okay.
Okay, oh, sorry, okay, pardon me.
I'm just curious on that front, through you, Mr. Chairman, when you said take it out of the whole equation, I think I need clarification from you on that part.
So I mean an objective, take an objective approach to things as opposed to that type of thing. So I'll tell you, for example, when we did the study in 2010, we got asked at a PIC whether or not the real estate values of homes on a street were a criteria for whether or not a route should be a truck route. And our opinion was no. So that becomes a question about social equity. That was what our perspective was as professionals, but that's the type of thing that can get raised in consultation sessions.
Would you say in your experience that because of, for reasons of equity, some people are more advantaged than others in participating in public consultation?
I actually haven't really had that experience. The types of things that we try to do to make sure that there is social equity is that we work very hard to talk to people at stakeholder consultation, and we understand some of them may not have as strong of language or presentation skills, but that's where we make an effort to engage people so that we do hear from all voices, whereas some others may be more polished by virtue of what they do for a living, et cetera, et cetera.
So just so I'm clear, thank you. On page 4, under moderated, facilitated panel discussion focus groups, You reference equity-seeking groups, and I just want to make sure that I understand what you mean by that. Through you, Mr. Chairman. In Appendix A, I'm sorry.
Right.
No, page 7, Appendix A. Under moderated facilitated panel discussions, fall of this year, reference is made to equity-seeking groups, and I'm just curious, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, and first of all, we also defer to staff and council to give us some direction on these things. We aren't really driving all of this. But, so for example, there could be decisions, or people could advocate for certain routes or certain criteria, et cetera, that may not take into account different impacts of decisions on where routes should be and not be. Because, so for example, let's say that, and I'm just for exampling, like we haven't gone through this again in detail. Let's say that a decision on a truck route network might impact a transit route. And it might impact a transit route that is a very important transit route that serves certain neighborhoods where there are fewer choices when it comes to moving around the city, et cetera. Then you would want to make sure that there's a voice to make sure that that's balanced.
So you would concede then, from your experience and just what you've said, that the ability to participate, and to participate, I think, evenly, is important.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask you then a question about the role of problem identification in framing scope, deliberations, and objectives. What does problem identification mean to you as a transportation planner? And when will this be defined for the community, problem identification? Through you, Mr. Chairman.
So we will make a first effort at that through the stage 1 work. When we talk about problem identification, City of Hamilton has described a vision and objectives, et cetera. You have an official plan, you have a transportation master plan that identify these types of things. And then you start with that, and then you take it down through, okay, the specific role of truck routes. Right? So at a very grand scale, we can talk about, for example, if you look geographically in Hamilton, you have a port located at a certain location, you have an airport located at a certain location, and there's certain routes that might be more direct, right? They might not all be appropriate, but they're more direct. So a problem is that you are trying to develop the airport, you're trying to develop the port's trying to develop, but geographically, they are located a certain distance from each other, and there's certain connectivity. So that's where you say a problem is, that is something to be dealt with, right? A problem is that geographically you have an escarpment. You only have certain routes that connect the lower up to the escarpment. So then you're trying to find something that works, recognizing all these different interests. Some of these interests are in line with each other. Some of them, there's trade-offs that has to be made.
Just so I understand, the project team has yet to define the problem, has yet to identify the problem.
Well, there's going to be a series of, I think, problems or challenges to address through this process. We haven't done all of that, no.
And are there different weights given to the problem definition?
Well, that's going back to what I said earlier. Different people will have different opinions on weights, right? And so we can provide, based on experience from other jurisdictions and et cetera, we can provide certain input on weights. But then through stakeholder consultation, people might say, okay, what if you put even a greater weight on this versus something or a lesser, and we can test out those and say, well, this is how it would impact how the truck route network might look. And in some cases, people, after you do that, might say, oh, I didn't realize that if we put a greater weight on this, that there might be these other issues that are raised that I hadn't thought of. So that's part of the whole development of alternatives and assessment process.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, what role does the city's vision play in weighting and in the assessment of alternatives?
Well, I'd actually like the city to speak to that. They're giving direction to us.
So through the chair, it was very clear in our terms of reference that our overall, our overarching vision is to be the best place to raise a child and age successfully. In terms of the process of creating the problem statement, it's accumulation of the several problems from different perspectives and combining those into one statement. I think part of the process of public engagement is to provide that input, that attribute that goes towards weighting what may be a higher value of a problem or not. And part of this process is coming back to this committee to say, this is what we heard from the public, from the various different public consultation things that we do, to let you know what the public has told us in terms of what they believe the weights are and what their perspectives are on that. And then we can move forward to the building alternatives.
Thank you. I do have a question. So through you, Mr. Chairman, just so I'm understanding the consultation. And in relation to the issue of equity and the importance of the ability to influence problem statements. If I'm reading this correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the Chamber of Commerce and the BIA, they have how many opportunities to engage?
Well, we've put them into different categories because you can have different BIAs as well, right? So it's quantified more that way. There's opportunity to provide input at both the first phase of the consultation and the second phase of the consultation for all the parties.
But is it fair, thank you, is it, I'm sorry, but if I'm reading this correctly, I'm seeing that in the fall, there's a business community meeting, and then in parenthesis, it says Chamber of Commerce and one BIA.
No, it's 1A and 1B. It wasn't meant to be 1.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'm just trying to, in my own mind, account for the question that was asked of us by the delegate. In that, what opportunity is there for them to have, if I'm reading this consultation chart correctly, the public, if you will, the unorganized public and otherwise, are channeled into a focus group that is sort of broadly defined, that is not professionally defined. So it's not a chamber, it's not those who are indirectly associated with trucking, but whose business may depend on trucking. Am I reading it correctly?
I would say the not organized members of the public participate through the Public Information Center. Okay, so that's when, if I were to describe that. The moderated facilitated panel discussion focus group was meant to be, to include organized stakeholder groups in a moderated discussion as opposed to just come in and look at some boards and talk to somebody and write some notes down. And this is where we have Glenn Pothier, who serves as a third-party, independent, going to facilitate a discussion. And the purpose of that discussion focus group is to hopefully get people that have put some time into looking at this issue in a session where there can be a constructive dialogue, different points of view, and that type of thing. And that was meant to happen before we get out too far along with things. So we wanted to get specific perspectives on people, look at the information, talk to staff, and then we said we would have this moderated, facilitated panel discussion focus group that is in a room where people get a chance to speak and talk hopefully with each other about the issues and which ones align and which ones where there are some differing opinions and better understanding of what other stakeholders' positions are. So that's what the purpose of that is. And we had listed a number of specific organizations that we're aware of, but we have examples, so that's not meant to be the final list of those, and we would be pleased to receive input on that.
Sorry, just so I understand that. So on page 7
Yes.
of Appendix A, you've identified some possible interest and advocacy groups.
Yes.
Truck Route Reboot, Environment Hamilton, the Hamilton Roundtable for Poverty Reduction, Immigrant Workers Center, resident groups, health groups, and other groups. Other groups meaning perhaps from the chamber that, say other groups as identified, which could
Right.
include individuals from.
Right, so from those earlier meetings, we would encourage representatives from the meetings before that to participate in this meeting so that we could have a dialogue on the different philosophies and perspectives on the truck route network.
But these groups aren't invited to participate in the truck dialogue.
That's right. What we're trying to do is we're trying to first get the perspective and the specifics from the first organizations identified, right? And then we would ask that if we find some people that are, we can't force them to participate, but we would ask ones that are particularly good at describing what the issues are and et cetera, and the needs are, to participate in this moderated, facilitated panel discussion so that there can be a collective, constructive dialogue about the issues.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the challenge I'm having with that is you're having a singularly basically defined opportunity to participate within the business community. And then you're having another opportunity with, I guess, a multitude of interests, I guess on the assumption that all of these may share the same interest. And then you're inviting a previous engaged community into this for purposes of to facilitate cross-dialogue and understanding, but you're precluding these very groups from that opportunity in the problem definition to begin with. And my problem is that doesn't seem to be equitable. And the second point I have is it is based on the assumption this is going to be a really crowded table, that all these groups are have shared interests, and I'm worried that their expertise and their experiences and their voices are, that's a lot of groups at one single table. I'm not sure how that is supposed to cross-inform what seems to be two sides here, two solitudes. So that's my concern. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Though, and so that maybe for the committee too. So what I'm hearing, Councillor Wilson, is either allow anyone to attend any meeting with any group at any time, and can be representing any group, or have no cross, that each group gets their own meeting, and then in the phase one, and then move on. I need to be clear what you're asking. Oh, you turned yourself, yep, go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to reconcile, so I have done my due diligence. The question that was asked by us by the delegate was, we request a stakeholder working group to be formed.
Okay, yeah, you didn't mention that until just now. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what I thought you were going.
I'm trying to, I think it's, my own personal opinion is it's a good example if we're talking about issues of equity, if we're talking about the importance of problem definition, if we're talking about the importance, I think as the speaker rightly pointed out, the need for us to learn and listen from each other. It's hard to do that.
Yeah,
When we
you didn't mention the stakeholder. I know what you're getting at now, sorry. I was probably the only one unclear. It looks like Ron wants to respond to you, but also Steve. Can I go to Steve and then Ron? Councillor Wilson, are you okay with that?
Of course.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Thank you, and through the chair. Again, the intent of coming to this subcommittee is to have these great discussions, and I think my preamble in the beginning was the number of meetings is the thing that is fixed, but how we conduct them. And so if the decision of the subcommittee is to have a stakeholder subcommittee with have all these different groups together, that is fine, but we just have to substitute that with a focus group or two that we might have identified. Again, we can switch out these things, they're a little bit interchangeable. The other thing I would just want to really highlight again is there is staff involvement for like attending pop-up engagements and to engaging other stakeholders as part of through problem identification, talking about solutions throughout the study. These focus groups are not intended to operate in a vacuum to be exclusionary. We want to have these conversations of who else. We want to expand our reach as far as possible, and this is part of tapping into your individual networks and for people to come forward. And again, the whole point of the pop-up engagement events are to engage people who don't normally go to a public meeting, and that has been my experience over the last 20 years of maximizing public engagement. When you go to these public meetings, sometimes they're not as well attended, and you have to engage people on a one-on-one basis, whether it's a kitchen table meeting or going to a barbecue in the community or going to an event and that type of thing, and engaging them in their concerns and really it's what we're communicating and what we want from them to contribute to the study.
On that, Councillor Wilson, and then Ron, you'll get a chance, okay? Because you okay? Ron, did you want to also respond to this?
That's fine. Yes, just a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to make it clear that there was a listing of a cross-section of interest in advocacy groups. There was no assumption that all of those groups would have common opinions on things, that they would represent a side or anything like that. In fact, we would expect that there might be different opinions. So I just wanted to make it clear that it wasn't presumed that this was like one side of an argument or something. It was a whole number of perspectives. I also want to say on the first side, dealing with different BIAs, they may not all have the same opinions either. It's not assumed that in any other meeting we're going to get a number of people just all having the same position on things. And the reason why this facilities panel discussion focus group has been proposed, and with two of them is so that we try our best that it become a really constructive and people are talking to each other as opposed to at each other, which is how things sometimes happen. So this was meant to be a real effort to try and promote a constructive approach by having this third-party independent, look, I'm just here to make sure that we get something out of it type approach. So that was the philosophy behind that. And again, I distinguish that from a public information center where it's a drop-in and there's people coming and that type of thing. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. You turned yourself off? You're through? Councillor Nia?
Thank you. Through the chair, starting with the report, and then I'll move into the appendix that details the consultation. So on page 3 of the report that does the high-level table summary of the public consultation activities and the work plan activities that are revised in the final column, similar to the question about how we're weighting problems versus how we're weighting indicators or how we're weighting values, I just wanted to be very transparent and clear about how we're weighting the consultations. So will the consultations that are defined here, between those that are the moderated, facilitated panel discussions, the business community, the open houses, the pop-ups, the survey, the feedback tool online, and the consultations in the box, are you just aggregating all of the information as received because they have the same questions being asked of each stakeholder group? Or will one group be weighted differently than the other? Will one form of consultation be weighted differently than another? Just wanted some clarity around that. Thank you.
Ron?
So, no, we aren't putting particular weighting on what has been stated in a particular forum or anything like that. It was just meant to work with city staff to figure out how comprehensive and different forums to provide opportunities to provide input.
And recognizing through the chair that some, like a meeting, would facilitate different questions being asked than perhaps a pop-up engagement where you're just trying to catch somebody within a 5-minute window or a 2-minute window. So just wanted to acknowledge that that's, the engagement tool does sometimes determine the amount of questions or queries or things that could be examined or inputted to by the people who are participating. And so if the general public is going to be, the unorganized general public, our residents, are going to be engaged through pop-up engagements or PICs, PICs being much more engaging versus a pop-up engagement, which really you've got a window of opportunity at a festival for maybe a couple of minutes of conversation. So the next question I have is...
If I, just to clarify,
Sure.
the chair, and
Please.
also through the City of Hamilton website and the ability to go online and actually provide your input through putting a pin on a map and putting a comment down, because there's people that don't want to go out to do things, but it's literally the equivalent of back the PICs where somebody writes a note on a Post-it note and sticks it on a map or something like that, that there would be a digital version, recognizing there's many people that want to have a say, but they want to be able to do it on their tablet from home. So that's another way.
Thank you.
Interesting. It'd be interesting to see if that digital piece could be integrated into the pop-ups, because then you could really use your data very well. So the question I had around the consultation in a box, I was just curious about how you see that being rolled out and who would use it, who could potentially be facilitating it, and how the data would be collected. Through the chair.
Sure. So actually, we would be preparing the materials. City of Hamilton staff would provide it to groups, and they would be dealing with that whole rollout. So I defer to the City of Hamilton staff if they wish to.
Consultation in a box. How does that work?
So through the chair, again, the materials would be provided that would, it has a facilitator, so there's some cues in what questions we're asking, whether it's we do the facilitation as a city, or we would work with stakeholders to engage their networks to facilitate the discussion. The main point being we need to start talking amongst ourselves. So those details will be fleshed out about the content of it, but that's the intent, is to really empower groups or individuals to engage in those conversations and have that dialogue.
So through the chair to Steve, so that's basically being able to equip the community or anybody who's interested in facilitating a conversation and giving input on the consultation to share the same framework or framework in order to receive the consultation into this process versus having a standalone thing that somebody else designs that may or may not align from a data perspective of getting the input calculated and integrated into the findings.
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm very specific around these questions. I have a few more and then some general questions.
Take your time.
Through the chair, on page 5 of the appendix, the recommended truck network meeting, that was the first place that I read truck network compared to stakeholder groups, et cetera. So could I just get a definition of that?
Ron?
So the recommended truck network would be in fact what is being proposed as the revised truck network for the route network for the city of Hamilton.
The actual truck
Yes,
route
the actual network, yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that it wasn't a network of stakeholders that
No,
are truck
no, it's the
associated.
truck
Thank you.
route network, yes.
Okay. And then moving forward, under the moderated facilitated panel discussions and focus groups,
7.
page 7. So I guess for me, through the chair, one of the things is being a counselor of an area that heavy trucks currently go through, the need to ensure that residents who live adjacent to the current truck route be identified as a significant stakeholder in this conversation. And I was just curious how the consultation, aside from the general public pieces, is perhaps geolocating or preferencing or giving voice to a level playing field of the residents who live in the existing truck route.
Great question. Ron?
Right. So there's a series. We would work through staff in this committee to identify geographically where it makes sense to hold the meetings. And then we would also look to the input on if there are other groups that you believe should be represented, then that's important as well. I have to say that for them to be successful, I think anybody that's participating, there has to be a little bit of work to make sure it's not just, well, we'll bring 40 people and someone else only brought 10 people. It was really meant to be a facilitated dialogue. So there would be some hope as opposed to a PIC where everybody shows up, that for a neighborhood or something like that, there would be some representation type of thing to keep the scale of it workable.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused there.
Councillor Nan? As chair, can I make a suggestion?
Please.
As Steve mentioned several times already this meeting, we're here as a committee and we can modify, and we're in the infancy of the engagement.
Yep.
If you wanted to move a motion that seeks a much more robust way to connect to those who are directly affected, that might be the route here to give some actual direction to staff. Just my advice, but please carry on.
I appreciate that through the chair. So perhaps in that bulleted list where there is resident groups, that we have a bulleted list that speaks specifically to identifying residents who live in the adjacent areas of the current truck routes. Okay. At the appropriate time. So, all right. Just another comment, picking up from the Councillor Wilson's questions around equity. And problem statement, one of the things, and this isn't, it also speaks to my previous point, is that there has been a historical and systemic impact of the existing truck routes and the existing, decades-long flow of goods and industry in our city, and it's geolocated in terms of health impacts, it's geolocated in terms of other social, economic indicators that those populations face who live adjacent to the community, adjacent to the truck routes. There's disproportionate health impacts. There's disproportionate distribution of income in those neighborhoods. So keeping the status quo just re-entrenches those health indicators and those social indicators for us as a municipality. And so part of what I see as an opportunity in this truck route, if the value statement is governing the outcomes and how we're weighting things, there is a possibility here that we could be using our truck route redesign to correct historical inequities. And by making a commitment to say that we recognize these communities have been disproportionately impacted including dire health outcomes as well as impacts on young people in the community, that the truck route could be redesigned, meeting those needs first and saying that we have a commitment to righting historical wrongs. So from an equity perspective, that would be another way to kind of actually lever the work of this truck route, which goes beyond perhaps just from a transportation planning process. But that's how I see equity integrating into this work. So I just offer that, and if you have any comments, that's great.
The whole purpose of this comprehensive stakeholder consultation is so that those views can be presented, and then, as I said, we would like to have a constructive dialogue to figure out how you turn that into an objective evaluation and what the outcomes might be of taking different approaches to things.
Right, so then we can measure the positive impact of a redesigned truck route on its population as well.
But we might also discover that there might be some unintended consequences that we would also want to make sure we're covering so that
For sure.
it doesn't just become the next spot type of thing, right? So, yeah.
That we're pushing the problem
Yes.
to another
Yes.
neighborhood. Understood. Thank you, I appreciate that. And then finally, around the evaluation pieces and the online survey and questionnaire, page 10 and 11, somewhere in that realm, there has been some interesting reception of online surveys that this municipality has conducted over the short term. And there has been sometimes occasion to accept the results of an online survey, and sometimes there's been occasion where the results of the survey have been viewed as being somehow skewed. Could you please help clarify how the research is going to be approached with enough rigor that it could withstand questioning that says that this is too qualitative versus quantitative, or some other scientific research analysis that I don't 100% understand?
Sure. So first of all, and I'm not an IT expert, but so for example, years ago for Toronto, we did a downtown transportation operations study, and we used this tool. And we were aware through social media that certain groups were being encouraged to flood the tool with
Right.
certain views. So a couple things. One is that there is a way of doing some filtering based on how the data is entered. And again, I don't want to get into it too much. And another thing is, to a certain point, if people identify it's an issue or are concerned about a location, like, I don't see it as being a voting system. Like if you say 980 people said this intersection's a problem and only 256 people said this intersection's a problem, you don't say, okay, well then 980 wins. You say, okay, there's two locations that people have identified are worthy of another look. That would be my perspective on it.
I'm glad to hear that you understood the problem that I was trying to articulate there, is that I just want to make sure that whatever online tools we're using to collect data, that it isn't invalidated as being a perception that our organized community or a disorganized community is flooding the survey. I want to make sure that the research that comes out of this consultation is held valid. Yep, so that was my main concern there. Thank you so much, and I think that's the end of my questions for now. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Yep, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for your patience. Can you please go to page 21? Or slide 21, sorry. You can go back to slide 21. Thank you. So, first of all, thank you for putting out on your issues and influences on slide 5 about rural issues. On slide 16, I'm glad you included the residential associations, and you actually had it at the very number 1 of your list. As working as an outreach worker, the best way to reach the people is to go to the people. And you obtain better successes engaging the very audience that we're trying to reach. The best way to do it is door to door. This is completely impossible. I get that. So is there a way we can utilize this time, because it looks like you're using up all next summer for sure, We have a super crawl. We have 3 agricultural fairs. We have the Winona Peach Festival. You have the Dundas Cactus Festival, Dundas Busker Festival, Festival of Friends, It's Your Festival. How simplistic could that be when you could reach thousands and thousands of people on one weekend alone?
So, sorry,
Sorry.
oh, I should wait.
No, that's okay. So have you thought about doing that very thing, is getting out to where the people congregate? And if it's a special event, you may get people from all over the city at that special event, but at least it's people within the city, and you could reach thousands in one weekend.
So that is actually the target of the pop-up consultations that we talked about.
Steve, do you want to?
Well, sorry, but when I see the time frame here, all the things that I just mentioned are between June and October. I see it now at council in September, which means that you're ready to fly.
Fair enough. And that there has been a bit of an issue in terms of the shift of the timing, just so you know. So I have attended the Rockton World Fair for the last 5 years, and I was at the Super Crawl, so I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes, those are the types of events that are, that can be very helpful that way.
Steve, we got a area where we don't consult during a great pop-up time opportunity.
Yes.
So through the chair, I'm pointing at Omar here in the gallery. And again, as I said previously, there's a staff, excuse me, a staff ownership and responsibility to not just in the summer, but throughout this process to go to arenas, go to talking with you, Councillor, where's the best place do you think that we should hit? Those are the conversations, and that's our responsibility as staff. There may be some opportunities for the consultant to attend, but I think in a cost-effective manner, staff has that responsibility to portray the message and act as the liaison to get this information that we need to make sure that we're well informed as part of this process.
And thank you for that answer. As I said, it's very difficult to reach out to the rural folks who also have the same issue. I haven't met one person in doing this job where they said, I wish there were more trucks on my road. Why can't the truck route be on my road? I have never met a person yet. So no one wants them. So, and that also includes people outside the urban boundary. The best way to get a hold of these people, again, and I'm offering my office as well, as you just said earlier, I would love to have a community meeting over this, because I think everybody realizes that if you take trucks off one road, it impacts another, vice versa. If you add a truck route, then it helps another road. So I totally understand the goods and movement. I also understand the safety issues, and it's a very delicate balance. I understand that. But to me, to reach the people out in the rural area who also have these concerns, come to the councillors' offices. Well, I'd be happy to host community meetings for you. That would not be a problem. And they're well attended at where we are. But there's also some real low-hanging fruit that, to me, it's such a huge missed opportunity if you do not reach out to the councillors to find out where their festivals are that particular time frame, and just get out there and meet the people one-on-one. You can't go door to door, but as a former outreach worker, I can tell you it's the next best thing. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Councillor Jackson, you're next. Councillor Tom Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and welcome back, Mr. Stewart. Good to see you again. And Steve, thanks for the preamble from a staff standpoint. Just some questions and clarifications. On your slide 19, please, Ron. So let me ask a couple of questions on this. I have, just once again to say to this committee, I mentioned it the first time we met, but just to refresh, through the hard work of an organized East Mountain Citizens Committee led by Chair Kate Fraser, at the time citizen representative from Environment Hamilton, Brenda Johnson, and Dr. Linda Lukaszek, we fought hard to get the ban of heavy trucks off of the Kenilworth access. We coincided that, of course, within the year of the opening of the Red Hill Valley Parkway. So fortunately, the timing of everything coincided perfectly. My point about raising that, and it's overall been successful, however, what's maddening, Ron, and I don't know if this is in your work plan, communication to the trucking industry. Hamilton Police can only be on site every so often to issue tickets where there is a truck route ban of restrictive signs that are up on the Kenilworth from basically Main Street up to Fennel, up in my area. It's been maddening. I've pleaded with a past administration staff of our traffic department and transportation planning. They do their best to communicate. My point being, in moving forward over the next year, whoever's going to be at the table, obviously the chamber's going to, even we appeal to the Chamber of Commerce through their network of the trucking community. Once a ban is in place, please adhere and comply. Mr. Chairman, through you to Ron. Ron, how would you work on getting that messaging across over this work plan over the next year, please?
To our mind, one way to have higher levels of compliance is to come up with a solution where you provide a route that you can say, this route is more than adequate, right? There's times you can say, look, maybe you want to do this little movement here, but we've provided you with an alternative that is quite viable. And so therefore, there's a degree of self-enforcement, right? And then you focus on what might be the reasons behind the people that are not violating it, and that are violating it, and what are the characteristics of them? Are they a truck type? Are they a particular subset of truckers, et cetera, the independents or the particular employer, et cetera, et cetera. So again, part of it starts by, when you talk to them and say, look, despite all the efforts to have this truck route network and have this discussion like that, there's still a problem there, and it impacts all of you, right? If there's a certain set, after a while, the residents in that, they aren't painting, they're painting everybody with the same brush with that. So you need to be a part of the solution. And as part of it, tell us what you can live with that can work with you, and then tell us how the city of Hamilton can work to make sure that there aren't people that are disobeying that truck route.
So Ron, in this, I hear you, in this all-players meeting and multitude of stakeholders that are going to be at the table, it'll be up to IBI and city staff over the next year or so to message that strongly to representatives from the trucking industry, through you, Mr. Chairman, please. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, I'm noting that down as a commitment from IBI. Thank you, because again, the ban on the Kenilworth access has been in place about 10, 11 years. Overall, it's been much, much better keeping those 18-wheelers, trying to make those hairpin dangerous turns coming up and down the escarpment, let alone the preservation of the escarpment and the quality of life. But when we appealed to the industry, it was almost like it wasn't taken seriously to a number of truckers individually and or companies that we found, and police have data, companies that we found that were repeat offenders. The dual signage hasn't really been part of the work plan. I raised it last time, and if it's not really part of the work plan, Ron, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would at least prepare you for either community groups, speaking from my own East Mountain Ward 6 area, and or even some members of the industry, the trucking industry, have expressed the frustration and the inconsistency in Hamilton that we have both restrictive signs and permissive signs. And outside municipalities that the industry comes from, as they make their way through our city, either to deliver and or move on, talk about the inconsistency of coming from other municipalities that have 100% restrictive signs or 100% permissive, but not the hybrid we have. Is this part and parcel of the work plan, or this will be an adjunct or an ancillary thing if the topic comes up, Mr. Chairman, through you?
So we will be looking at that as part of the process. And as you know, we've been part of it previously. And I'm going to tell you, as a traffic engineer with 35 years experience, the Hamilton hybrid, that is a challenge For the
Geez.
very words that, for the very reasons you stated.
Director and managers, you've all noted this, please. Thank you very, I'm being very cheeky, but
Okay.
I'm being sincere at the same time. I've been waiting for somebody with credentials, Mr. Stewart, to say that for a number of years, but I get it that.
Said it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. Thank you for saying that. So it sounds like it'll be part of the work plan. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And again, Edward, Brian, and Steve, absolutely no disrespect whatsoever. It was even past administrations that were more promoting and stating that the hybrid had greater advantages than disadvantages. So I'm thrilled it's on your radar. On page 7, a couple more questions of the Appendix A that the audience won't have, but is a part of Report 9 here, unless they've got Report 9.1. I just need, as I guess I'm the only mountain representative, if you will, at this truck route subcommittee, Mr. Chairman. I'm the only, well, she's Ward 11 with the suburban area, Mount Hope and Bimbrook. Yeah. Our mountain community is we're very protective of possessive of our mountain community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, and I know you come to our quad pad arena often with your son. Okay, so, is this mostly a and I'm very supportive of what can be done to make the lower city and the downtown areas that have suffered through many, many years of, it seems like, an increased volume of trucks, especially with all the great restoration of the core and neighborhoods, which I'm absolutely delighted to see in the lower city, from wards 1 right to 5, that is occurring. So I get safety first, but I need to know for the people I represent and for my other colleagues from the Mountain Run, this isn't just a downtown-centric study. Through you, Mr. Chairman, please.
We have been directed that this is a City of Hamilton comprehensive study. We have had no direction from staff that this is focused on a particular part of the City of Hamilton.
I get it, there may be some much-needed attention to areas that have not benefited from a truck route ban, like I was fortunate enough to get 10, 11 years ago, but I just wanted to make sure it was not exclusive. So thank you for confirming that. A couple of last questions. On the same page 7, Ron, of the Appendix A you have in front of you, invite representatives from a cross-section of interest and advocacy groups, possible sectors. Well, the word possible, what does that mean, Ron? Because that sounds like, well, you might just want to pick and choose. When you say possible, and you've listed a whole group of people, Seniors Advisory Committee, which I'm grateful for, neighborhood associations, your possible meant that you want many, or it'll be a matter of consultants and staff picking and choosing, and Tom, don't get too excited, because these may not all be included. Through you, Mr. Chairman, please.
So the reason we said possible was because we did not want to be seen to be dictating which representatives might be invited. We didn't want to just leave it open-ended. We provided some examples and we worked with city staff, but it was by no means meant to be exclusive or fixed or anything like that.
Thank you. And last question. Surely to goodness, no matter what we all hopefully agree to a year from now, to make our neighborhoods and streets where our families play and recreate and live and go to school, Ron, none of the final plan, Mr. Chairman, that this committee and council may approve will mean a hill of beans if Hamilton Police Services are not involved, because you could put all the bylaws in place, but if there isn't enforcement where necessary, it won't mean anything. It'll be nice to say we did it on paper, and now it's a matter of those that still are adverse to what we've done and don't care because they have to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. We need police enforcement. My point, Ron, being, I don't see anywhere where Hamilton Police Services might be at your table over the next year. And as a police board member, I would encourage that. That's my last question, Mr. Chairman, through you. Question or comment? It's a question upon my comment that I made. Thank you,
So
Ron.
I'd like to actually defer to city staff who have been already engaged in conversations with internal stakeholders.
Terrific, Ron.
Steve, please.
Steve, please.
Through the chair, absolutely. Hamilton Police are vital to this, and they were actually part of even creation of the terms of reference. We are in constant communication with them. At the end of the day, if we don't present something that they can enforce, then we're creating a problem for them. We don't want that to happen. We want them to be a partner as part of this, and they will be, throughout the study, included.
Thank you, Manager Malloy. Mr. Chairman, thanks for your indulgence. I'm overall pleased with the direction we're going in and the next step and phase. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll have myself now on the list and pass the chair over to our vice, Councillor Nan. Thank you. Just on that last point, and it was made earlier by the good councillor, the only representative of the mountain here today, the new tech, it's like a GPS tech in the trucking industry that I've heard of, which would make enforcement, I would suspect, easier. Have you heard about this? It just basically, all trucks, I believe, are going to be required to, or they're looking at requiring the trucking industry to have these GPS tracking devices, which would easily prove that they've maybe disobeyed the rules?
So yes, we have said in our terms of reference that we will deal with the technological advances and how they might serve to support the truck route network.
And ultimately, in the end, enforcement.
Right. Again, we aren't responsible for enforcement, but again, there are tools which help provide the evidence for enforcement.
So through you, Chair, it looks like with the advancements in technology, in your expertise as a traffic expert, would that make it easier then?
Yes, it would serve as a tool, but again, my comment is legislation ultimately determines the ability to use tools for enforcement purposes.
So through you, Chair, where's that legislation at? Or am I way off? I thought I had heard that there's an effort afoot to require all trucks to carry these devices.
I don't have all the specific details, but I agree that ultimately there is those types of devices, just like red light cameras, automated speed enforcement, that type of thing, are tools, but then there's the whole legislative side, and then there's the resources to apply those tools, right? Yes.
Through you, Chair, to staff, any update you can offer me? Have you at all heard about this new technology that may help us down the line, thanks to new tech to enforce?
So through the chair, yes, the electronic logging devices.
That's what it is, thank you.
Is used in the United States. Transport Canada has been looking into that. We have been in discussions with Transport Canada regarding that, as well as other data collection initiatives as part of the study. But to this point, there is no legislation thus far, but they are certainly looking into it, and it is on the radar for the future.
Okay, so we don't have any firm dates on when we might see a debate provincially on legislation. Okay. Well, I think we should probably watch that one closely, this term of council as the truck route subcommittee. The first delegate said, quote, trucking industry has the weight of the bargaining, end quote, in this exercise. So that's disturbing. The delegate is representing a growing movement that is passionate, relevant, very important to the dialogue here, particularly as it relates to Cannon Street, but I'm not going to be parochial. This is a citywide issue. Nobody, I think Councillor Johnson has the quote of the day, ever comes up to any councillor and says, I love the trucks and I want more of them on my street. But that needs a response, I think, when you have the representative from Truck Route Reboot, and obviously Environment Hamilton's here and everybody else, saying the trucking industry has the weight of the bargaining, end quote. Here we are at the start of a process. I don't think any of us, including anybody in this gallery, wants this process to be divisive. We want it to work, and we want it to work at all costs, and come out of this with the very best new system we can possibly come out of this with. So through you, Councillor Nan, to Steve first, or okay, Brian, please, just a response from the staff who are obviously fronting this very important exercise, your response to that.
Just as director for the study, I can assure you that no one individual group, trucking industry or otherwise, has a dominant say. I would say ultimately council, and through advice by this subcommittee, has the strongest say. And you know, you're ensuring that we're consulting with many other people. That said, I don't think we should be afraid of engaging the trucking industry, because we're going to learn from them and also use it as an education tool to say, hey, here's what your impacts are, and here's what we might do about it. So, you know, give us a bit of leeway, hopefully, to engage with all parties, including the trucking industry.
Yeah, and certainly, I know there's people in this gallery who have already done that as well, engaged the trucking industry. So, oh yeah, everybody at the same table takes me to my next point, which is this stakeholder working group. So are you working on that right now? So I'll let you do that, and then maybe I'll speak to it afterwards. So that's good, and it sounds like Councillor Nan has another piece covered in amendment here that will further help staff. As again, we're really getting going here. This meeting's about how we're going to proceed with engagement, and I have no issue whatsoever with a component, and it'll probably end up being a very key component in a stakeholder working group where everyone's sitting together. And again, I think we're going to get much more done if we're less divisive. There's always going to be the mean tweets, and I'm sure you don't take them personally after 30 years of business. We apparently have a world-class facilitator with all that extra money we gave you, which is great. So that means the room will be calm, whatever room that facilitator may be in. So I'll wait for the amendments, and I'm likely going to support those amendments, and I just want to make sure that everything else, a lot was covered with a lot of great questions and comments from committee thus far. And I just want to make sure, yep, I think we have it covered once we get to these amendments, and I think we could probably start with the first amendment from Councillor Nan, so I will take the chair back, Councillor Nan, and go to you.
Moved by myself, and I need a seconder.
Oh, you know what? Let's receive the delegate. Are we
Oh,
done with
thank
the
you.
delegate? Move to receive Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favor?
Carried.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ron. Excellent job. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Therefore, be it resolved that A, neighborhoods where residents who live adjacent to the current truck route and whom experience disproportionate negative health impacts and economic inequities be identified as a specific focus group to be added to those whom are invited to a moderated, facilitated session. And B, apologies, Chair, I didn't mention it in my comments before, but it was in relation to one of the delegation points earlier, that the data collected from Environment Hamilton be factored into the data sets collected for the purpose of the truck route master plan review. So it's a two-parter.
That was the one I missed. Perfect. I'm glad you caught that. So that was question 3 from the first delegate. Glad you covered that. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. Any comments on that motion? All in favor on that amendment? Yep, yep. Anybody living on a truck route will get a special invite to take part. That's unanimous. Unanimous. And Councillor, is that it, Councillor? Councillor Wilson, you have an amendment or a motion as well?
I do. I'm not going to be as eloquent as you, but I am concerned. This is hard stuff, and no one's going to want a truck route. And my concern was, I don't think it's in our interest to have any dual tracks of consultation. And I think we have to be clear at the outset that when we bring people to the table, when we hear directly from them, we also become accountable for the information that we learn about. So in keeping with the suggestion that came from one of our delegates, I'd like to, and I'm open to word changing for sure, that a stakeholders working group be formed to enable these stakeholders to learn firsthand of the preliminary findings, and that the concerns and priorities of other stakeholders with an opportunity to contribute to the process in a way that is equitable and fair, that this stakeholder working group include members of the business community and organized equity-seeking groups, and that this stakeholder working group meet in accordance with the consultation meeting schedule set out in Appendix A.
Okay, so learn of preliminary findings, but
Sorry.
Preliminary findings that came from where? Because that's engagement too, and you're saying you don't think there should be separate forms of engagement. Just so we're clear.
Yep, so on page 8, maybe I'm
Okay.
not, of Appendix A,
All right.
it's talking about bringing preliminary findings and recommendations to stakeholders and collecting feedback on it,
Right?
right? So what I'm just trying to enunciate is that we give everybody an opportunity to be in receipt of everything so that they can hear the data firsthand together, and that they can learn about the impacts together, and that they try and define a route forward together.
Okay, Councillor Johnson.
Just a quick question. I understand completely where this is coming from. My concern is, you saw the timeline up there. To try to get everybody in the same room at the same time is going to be near to impossible, given work schedules or no work schedules or family commitments, et cetera. So I think the working group, if it's a cyber working group, or if it's if you have all the meetings open to everybody, then it can be a working group. My concern is, I thought this was a working group as well, so I'm really confused. I understand the concept of it. I understand where it's coming from. I just don't know logistically or practically how that can be accomplished.
So to the mover and staff want to comment too, if that's okay with you. It's your motion and we have the floor. Steve, go ahead.
So through the chair, I'm trying to listen and understand the intent of the motion is really making sure that all the feedback from the various stakeholder groups and the preliminary findings are shared equitably to everybody else. So it's really having some sort of centralized repository, if you will, of information that, of minutes from the stakeholders. So whatever that information is gathered at those meetings is shared amongst the other stakeholders, if that's my understanding of what's being asked. So we have an opportunity through the project webpage that we could maybe identify that as an opportunity to share that type of information. So maybe I'll just offer that. But if that is not what is intended, then I guess I just need to understand a little bit better what's being asked. Thank you.
You yield to Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson? Yeah, fair enough.
I never said no to you. Oh, no. Well, no, what I was thinking of, frankly, was, while I do appreciate it may be a scheduling challenge, I do think there is some value, because I think if people see this as important either to their business or their livelihood, and certainly we've seen on the street that, we have volunteers that are out there counting trucks in all types of weather. They've made a priority. That is there no appetite for having a roundtable of these stakeholders who are going to participate in that, coming together to hear the feedback that is received along the way?
Yeah, I get it. A round table. Go ahead. You still have the floor, but you turned yourself off, so I'm going to put you back on.
That really adds a lot more clarity. So it can be part of the process that bring all the people in at the same time, like maybe a one-time shot. Absolutely. I think where I'm hearing was a working group. It sounds like an ongoing scheduling over and over and over again. So yeah, I totally agree. If there's an opportunity that the staff can bring everybody into the room at the same time and have one of those, not a workshop per se, but let everybody have their say where they're coming from, the BIAs, the residents, the Cycle Hamilton, everybody around that table say something. It doesn't mean they all have to agree, but it helps them to understand where the other person's coming from.
Exactly.
But not 6 or 7 meetings of this, because I'm looking at the timeline. The people who want this to work faster, they want it done yesterday. They want the trucks off their streets yesterday. So that's where I was coming from. Yeah, if it's part of the process, and I'm seeing them nodding their head, sure, have a special day, everybody comes together, absolutely.
Right, okay, Councillor Wilson. I might get you to read it one more time. And I've lost my tech. Does anybody have a, can you go to the second to last slide, 21? Or is it, can you just flip over to second to last slide, 21? Or did you take it? Yeah, the timeline. Thank you, Lauren. That's perfect. Right. So, to the motion, what's preventing us, through you, Councillor Nance, sorry, you got to take the floor. To Steve, what's preventing us from reaching out to folks from every group that we intend to and expect to engage with, and throwing that early on, as early as possible, throwing an opportunity their way to participate as a representative for their group, organized or otherwise, to be part of a stakeholder group that will inform and be part of the overall consultation. That will be a contributing and guiding, hopefully, a regular delegate to our subcommittee as well. You're already connecting with the Port Authority. You've talked to Trucking. You've talked to Environment Canada. You've had meetings with councillors. What's preventing you from getting a hold of, to answer to this motion, a representative or each and every group, organized or otherwise, and say we're now, as part of the engagement process, assembling a stakeholder group, and we want a participant from your organization to take part. Is that doable? Is it going to need another 50,000 of red light camera funds? How we, from a staffing point of view, how can we do it, and how soon can we do that, if we can do it?
So through the chair, the opportunity, I believe, are the four meetings that we've identified for a focus group or facilitation. Is what do you do with those 4 meetings? If those 4 meetings end up being the stakeholder working group meetings, there's nothing preventing us. If you want those meetings on top of a stakeholder meeting, we may, again, do you want 6 public open houses, or do you want 8? Within the existing budget, we can work around those opportunities. And I think really the direction that I'm taking right now is to kind of report back to you on the alternatives that you will want to consider based on the direction that you're giving us today.
Okay, so can I hear the motion again? Thanks. Sorry.
That a stakeholders working group be formed to enable these stakeholders to learn firsthand of the concerns and priorities of each other, and an opportunity to contribute to the process in a way that is equitable and fair. That the stakeholder working group include members of the business communities, but the group that Steve and company have already been speaking to, who are organized, and that the stakeholder working group meet in accordance with the consultation schedule set out in Appendix A. Now, how and when that is done, I'll have to refer to staff.
Together before or after the actual PICs or focus groups then. Yeah, I don't think that's a problem. I would just, I just want it to work, Councillor, so I would suggest that, just let me ask again through you, Deputy, you got your contacts in place. You certainly have a robust list of folks you have already or on a preliminary level have engaged with, yes?
Through the chair, yes, correct. There is no barriers to engaging these people. The question, I think, is this above and beyond the number of meetings already identified.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is it's aligning with the current plan. You just need to set aside an hour before or an hour after with the specific stakeholders on those dates that you end up having meetings at anyway. So I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine with supporting it, and I know obviously there's people here that'll be happy to obviously take part as stakeholders as well. One from the Reboot, one from Environment Hamilton, whoever it may be, and of course there'll be others that we've identified and already talked about. With that, I'll take the chair back. The motion's on the floor. It's seconded by Councillor Nan. All in favor? Record it. Perfect. Thank you. Any notices of motion?
Motion to receive the information report, please.
Is that you?
That was me.
That's old school, thank you. That was great, yeah. A motion, I was just gonna do that. Motion to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Johnson. All in favor? It's a receive, it's not recorded. And now, a motion, oh, sorry, there is no, any notices, right? We just did motions, not notices. Any general information? Friday afternoon at 3. Okay. And move to adjourn. Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Jackson. All in favor? It is carried. Thank you, Lauren.